All righty, let's go ahead and get started today. I apologize for those who somehow got the wrong link. Not exactly sure how that happened. We'll have to investigate that afterwards. Today we are going to be holding our second in a series of virtual brown bag lunch webinars related to the Curriculum Standards Panel that's brought to you by the National CyberWatch Center. Today's topic is an open source model for creating competency-based cybersecurity curricula. My name is David Toby. I'm the Director of Research and Assessments with the National CyberWatch Center and the co-host of the virtual brown bag lunch series. Before we begin, you need to be aware that this session is being recorded. Anything spoken or shared on screen by the host or presenter or any of the participants will be part of the recording. This way others can participate in the future if they were unable to attend today. And if any of you at a future time would like to hear a recorded version of a virtual brown bag lunch, they will be posted on the National CyberWatch curriculum site as well as the community site for the Curriculum Standards Panel. If you object to being recorded, you should either not speak during the session or you may simply disconnect from the session altogether. All participants will be placed on mute by the host. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment during the session, please use the raise hand icon that appears at the bottom of the participant window in the Zoom application. Wait for the speaker to call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Be sure to mute yourself again when you have finished asking your question or providing your comments. Alternatively, you can use the chat window to post questions and comments. We will be addressing these questions as they arise. As well, there will be a general question and answer period at the end of the webcast. Now let's get started with today's presentation. I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker for today, Alan Watkins. Alan has been the chair and managing director of the National CyberWatch Center's Curriculum Standards Panel for the Information Security Fundamentals course from 2017 to present. The Curriculum Standards Panel, or CSP for short, consists of experts from academia, industry, and government for the creation of curriculum standards for a foundational cybersecurity course using competency-based mastery learning principles. Alan has been a member of the CSP since its inception. The first panel in 2016 mapped the CyberWatch curriculum to national competency frameworks. Mr. Watkins is an independent cybersecurity consultant and an adjunct professor in cybersecurity and information assurance at National University. In his prior career, Mr. Watkins worked for the city of San Diego in various positions for over 36 years, starting with 12 years in law enforcement and then 24 years in information technology, including 10 years in the management and 5 years in the city's IT operations and security management. He has been a member of the San Diego InfraGard chapter for over 15 years, and his public sector career includes critical infrastructure protection for water and wastewater systems. In 2016 to 2018, Mr. Watkins also developed curriculum and teaching materials for 2 graduate level and 3 undergraduate level cybersecurity courses. I will now turn our today's session over to Alan to begin the webcast. Alan?
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could attend today. Hopefully we'll make this session worth your while. We got a little bit of a late start, so I may zoom through some of the not so pertinent material so we can get to the part that is more important. So looking at the agenda, we're going to do a brief history of where the panel has been, results from the Competency-Based Mastery Learning curriculum development out of the last phase, and I'll probably use the abbreviation CBML instead of spouting that long term out every time. And then we're going to look at how do we move forward with this open source model. And as David said, there'll be a Q&A, question and answer period at the end. So what I'm going to call phase 1 is really the 2016 panel that was the core curriculum mapping project. We had a little over 115 volunteer members. This was actually in one large panel as opposed to broken down into smaller groups. We used crowdsourcing techniques to have panel members work through the 6 major tasks of mapping. And as David mentioned, it was the different curriculum, or not the curriculum material, but the topics and the learning objectives from 5 of the National CyberWatch courses to different national frameworks. For instance, the NICE Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, among others. Also the NSA's CAE knowledge units is another one that got mapped to. What we found at the end of that mapping process was definitions of what we call pathways for learning, so that there is a distinction between foundational courses that are needed before a student or learner could move on to intermediate courses or advanced courses. And then there was a pathway series which has not been fully developed, but would take you from the foundation series courses into particular specialty areas of cybersecurity. Phase 2, and actually phase 2 and phase 3 are the two parts of the most recent grant-funded project through the NSA, and that was the ISF course, Curriculum Development. In this project, we did have project management through grant funding for my spot as the managing editor, and then 3 associate editors. We had more volunteers this time, over 150 volunteers, and they were divided into 3 topic area working groups, which we called TOGs. The TOGs were based on the 5 primary functions from the NIST cybersecurity framework, those being identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And sorry, continuing on, this is the first, to our knowledge, use of the CBML methodology combined with crowdsourcing. And this panel had 8 major tasks to complete before even getting to the development of the curriculum phase. So those 8 major tasks were looking at topics, concepts, learning objectives, based on not only the ISF course, but also similar courses that that are commercially available. For instance, CompTIA's Security Plus course and the ISC Squared System Security Certified Practitioner, or SSCP, certification course. So all of those were combined, mapping what the sequence of events that needed to take place, so which concepts needed to be learned before higher level concepts, which learning objectives needed to be completed before moving on to other learning objectives. And there was a large pictogram that was created out of a pathway modeling tool that we have that showed 7 key, or what we're calling threshold learning objectives. Those learning objectives are the ones that are critical that the student or learner understands and comprehends and actually masters before they move on to the next set of learning objectives. So what did we do with those 7 learning objectives? We created special interest groups, or SIGs, 1 for each learning objective, and we split the members from the 3 TOGs into those groups, now down to about 15 members per each SIG. And as the slide said, we asked that the panel members can participate in more than 1 SIG if they cared to. Earlier, we tried to keep the members within a specific TOG for areas of specialty and expertise. But once we got to this phase now of developing course material, we felt it was better to let people roam among the different 7 learning objectives. The SIG's purpose was instructional design and creation of learning modules. They basically each were to select 2 to 4 concepts or topics under their learning objective and start creating materials for that. Prior to them actually getting into the meat of creating materials, our leadership team developed a set of definitions and instructions so that everybody was on the same page with what does it mean to be creating the CBML materials, and including assessments. one of the achievements out of the project was a readiness assessment for entry level into information security fundamentals course. And it took background materials from prerequisite courses, for example, the CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Server Plus courses. Some of the types of questions that would come from those background level education or training would be necessary before someone could jump into the cybersecurity fundamentals course. And later on, we'll talk about the availability of that assessment if people want to take it. So I'll back up and say that out of the 7 learning objectives, each of them had dozens of concepts and topics underneath them. One of them had as many as 80. So the task of the SIGs were to figure out what are the top 2 to 4 of those concepts. And the idea being, what are the necessary foundational concepts first that would cross the boundaries into the other concepts. So the 7 groups started developing lesson plans. We actually created one learning module that was just focused on network scanning, introduction to network scanning. And it has 6 lessons with a few quizzes. And it will be available for piloting sometime in the near future. This prerequisite readiness assessment I just mentioned is complete and operational. There were lectures created and then lab outlines. We did not task the members with creating actual labs because that requires an environment to build VMs or however else the labs need to be built, but at least outlining what concepts need to be taught and tested within a lab environment. And then one of the last things we did as we were trying to start building this library of learning materials is cataloging publicly available videos from YouTube and some other sources. We sort of called this scrapbooking, so that you go out and choose one or two of the concepts from the learning objective list, search YouTube or search other sources that are not copyrighted. And it's amazing, of course, what is out on YouTube. There's a lot of information out there. So we started building a catalog related to certain concepts of the videos that might be appropriate. The second step of that process is having someone either on the editorial team or within the panel, a group of panel members, vet the videos to make sure they really are appropriate, and that, more importantly, that they cover the content that's necessary. Just throw this in here if you're interested in finding out more about competency-based learning curriculum. There's this website link for the National CyberWatch Center, and we'll be posting some links at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to write that down, but this will be expanded as new materials are developed. So now, moving forward, we're switching gears from being a grant-funded project to being an open source, ongoing volunteer effort to keep developing curriculum. It might seem daunting that there's hundreds of concepts under the 7 threshold learning objectives, but the way CBML works, you can address several concepts at a time in some cases that are similarly related, but the level of detail is coming out of the training course or the module with at least 95% competency, as opposed to coming out of a standard, maybe a schoolroom course with a grade of C, which might be a 70% competency. In addition to the 7 threshold learning objectives, there are dozens of other learning objectives in that chart that I mentioned that all still pertain to the ISF course. And then beyond that, we're looking at least 4 other additional foundational courses to be developed. So how are we going to do that? So the proposed structure, and I hope this is somewhat readable on your screens. NCC still has a leadership role at the top. There would be a managing editor, and then the chairs of the overall CSP and then the TOG groups. We would, instead of having a single chair, have co-chairs to split the responsibilities and hopefully reduce the chance for burnout in those positions. And then also the TOG memberships, we would want the panel members to be able to pick and choose which one, or participate in more than one as they see topics or concepts that they're interested in. So it would be duplicated for each of the additional courses, the NCC courses that already exist, and would be modified or updated into the CBML format, include Linux, Windows Server, networking, and scripting. And there may be others. The other benefit of the process that was created is that other courses from other institutions can also use the same CBML process to modify and update or create new course material. I'll pause and say that the NCC was selected by the NSA to help host the repository for all of the curriculum that was being developed as part of the grant that just ended last month. So there's an opportunity to expand the CBML library with information from those other grant participants. So increasing engagement. Some of the goals to continue the CSP would be trying to identify a model to make it sustainable. And using an open source community for curriculum development is similar to other open source communities that are used for similar and other purposes. Again, rotating leadership roles help prevent burnout and have co-ownership of the different groups. And in trying to identify ways to better engage participants, now focused on instructional design, open source development in other areas, the reward is the attribution. So whatever you create or whatever's created, the author gets the attribution for doing that work. The academic publishing side of things, for journal articles or white papers or probably conference presentations, again, attribution. Now there may be some conferences that provide stipends or whatever. If you or participants create book length work, then of course you have the potential for royalties from the book. So the structure that we're looking at, that chart that I showed you, open source and crowdsourcing is not new, as I said, and has been used effectively. Some of you may be familiar with it was called the Joint Task Force on Cybersecurity Education, but it really was a combination of ACM, IEEE, Computer Science Group, the AIS, Security SIG, and IFIP. They produced the document called CSEC 2017, which is Curricular Guidance for Post-Secondary Cybersecurity Education. So they went through several rounds of open source commenting to get to the version 1 release document that was just issued earlier this year. And then also, some of you may or may not be familiar with the Center for Internet Security. They have been responsible for what is called the 20 critical security controls for several years. And we just went through an update from version 6 to version 7 at the end of last year, and it was released in March this year. So both of those were very successful in actually international input on both the curricular guidelines and on the security controls. So we know that the process works. We want to take advantage of the existing resources that have been in play through the grant project. They will continue. There's a Google Plus community set up for the overall ISF panel, and then each of the working groups has a separate community so they can focus on the learning objectives and concepts that are pertinent to their tasks. I would mention that the intent is to have the working groups have bi-weekly synchronous sessions to work through different either scrapbooking or what we call storyboarding also as you create lesson plans or modules to have that opportunity to interact personally with other people in the group. This is just a quick screenshot of the Google Plus community for the ISF primary panel. And you can see someone clipped in footprinting and reconnaissance as part of a potential for our scrapbooking of videos that are available. And on the right-hand side is the actual announcement that David posted for the session this week that was on Wednesday and today. So again, each TOG has a list of learning objectives and the related concepts that already exists based on the 7 learning objectives. The community members can again select not only which TOG they want to participate in, but which learning objective and which concepts they are most wanting to help develop. I mentioned a minute ago there would be bi-weekly online sessions so that it allows active collaboration, but obviously you can people post information on a regular basis to provide input. So creating the new learning modules, the timelines and deadlines would be set up by the TOG communities themselves. The products would be evaluated by the editorial review board on a quarterly basis, and after they're approved and vetted, they can be added to the master learning library and then made available publicly. The intent would be to either incorporate them, if necessary, into existing courses, or it could be that new courses are being developed around the learning materials. All of the materials in the library will have a Creative Commons license so that the information can be fairly easily shared, especially in the academic community. But this also rolls over into, for instance, corporate training. How do you get involved? If you were a member of an earlier of the ISF curriculum panel or even the first panel, and maybe you've just been inactive, you should still have access to the Google communities that were granted during when you were active. And if you just try and reconnect, the Google Plus community, it would be, if you have to reset your password, you can follow their instructions. However, if you lost the links or the instructions to join the community, then you can send an email to National CyberWatch, info@nationalcyberwatch.org, and then get reconnected. If you have not been a member of a prior panel or the current panel, then, or if you just have questions about joining and what the effort is going to entail, an email to that same address will get you some information back. So you might be wondering why you should get involved in this volunteer project. Again, just a few suggestions. Attribution for whatever learning materials you've created, or attribution if you have academic papers or articles or even a presentation at a conference potentially. The potential for royalties from book length publication, and then benefits to the broader academic community by having and building this library of modules and components. and eventually benefiting the cybersecurity workforce by following the CBML methodology, and the output would be more qualified, more highly qualified candidates that have completed these training courses or educational courses at a 95% competency level instead of maybe a 70 or 75%. So if you want more information on the standards panel itself, this website page is in the process of being updated with more current information. Or you can email again to info@nationalcyberwatch.org. I'll leave this up. Actually, I can post it. We'll post it in the chat so that you can copy it down. And even though we started late, I think we're almost on schedule. And now's the time. If you have questions, you can raise your hand, click on the raise your hand icon, or if you want to just type it into the chat window, we'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, while we're waiting for folks to post some questions or comments, Ellen, let me start us off by asking a question. So how might those listening to this webcast apply the lessons learned from the challenges and successes with the curriculum development process to facilitate transitioning to competency-based and mastery learning in their institutions? In other words, what are the next 2 or 3 steps that you would suggest they take?
Good question, David. So some of the lessons learned were looking at the level of detail and the instruction material that was provided through the editorial panel or the editorial team to the larger panel has some pretty detailed instructions on what to expect and how to develop CBML types of materials. And one of the key concepts of CBML itself is teaching to the wrong answer, or trying to teach students why, find out why students got a wrong answer, and then take extra steps to give them the correct answer and why it's a correct answer, as opposed to why they believed their answer was correct when it really wasn't. So assessments play a big part, and focusing on the higher competency really is focusing on correcting what is known as misconceptions or misunderstanding of the information.
Okay, great. It looks like we do have a question from a participant here. Do you have entities that are already planning on using the first modules? How are you planning to track feedback, modifications, corrections, updates to the curriculum based on use by students and instructors?
Thanks, Lauren. So we have a group of academic institutions working with NCC that are hopefully going to use the modules once they're fully created. So the only full module right now is the introduction to network scanning, and then there's also the readiness assessment. But the intent would be, as each module is finished, it would become available for those institutions or others. I think, David, I might have to defer to you on how we're going to really do the feedback loop on it.
Yeah, happy to do that. So first of all, on the readiness assessment, which was actually the first to be released, it is available for those who are interested in signing up to be part of the pilot through the National CyberWatch Center website and the associated membership management system that we use called Wild Apricot. And currently there's 8 organizations that have signed up already, although we just opened the sign-up period. The pilot will run from now, basically the beginning of May, through the end of October. to support those who might want to implement it over the summer or in the fall semester. So again, more information can be obtained by accessing these or the info by sending a note to the info at nationalcyberwatch.org or accessing the CyberWatch website. The scanning module will be following shortly thereafter, and really one of the purposes of these virtual brown bag lunches is to introduce new modules as they become available, and that's what future sessions will be focused on. And I'll talk more about that here as we close, but each of these will have a community site in our member management system that will allow for feedback, for revision suggestions, etc. And obviously, as updates occur, they will be communicated back out to those participating in each of these programs. Over time, what we're expecting is that as these standards start to become known and proliferated, that they may become a source of accreditation for organizations who want to demonstrate that they're producing competencies in their instructional programs. That's obviously a grand vision. We've got a ways to go before we get there, but the process is designed to support that. So the panel is there to continually take the feedback and revise and extend the materials that are produced. And then obviously as those get produced, they will be communicated out, disseminated out through the CyberWatch network. Hopefully that answers your question, Lauren. So the effort will be driven generically, not based on specific demand from NCC members and partners. Yes, that's true. We are making this open nationally. Of course, we did it in this first course in conjunction with the National Security Agency and the CAE program that they operate, and therefore this is all public domain work, and we want to make it as generic as you put it as possible. In terms of the timeline or plan for finishing additional modules, that's really up to the topic area working groups. We want this to truly be a community effort and allow them the flexibility to define their timelines. That'll be, again, some information that we'll be providing as the process moves along. And again, in each of these monthly virtual brown bag lunches, we'll provide an update related to that progress. So, and then in terms of finishing them in a specific order, there is, again, it'll be somewhat up to the topic area working groups to decide how, what order, things get produced. But we do have the framework that Alan referenced at the beginning of this presentation, the Foundation series and the Pathway series. And therefore, our intent really is to start with the foundations of cybersecurity. There are 5 major building blocks there that then, once somebody has mastered those, we feel they will be in a good position to now begin to specialize into some of the more intricate aspects of cybersecurity, whether that be forensics or pen testing or a variety of other areas. And again, the diagram for that is available on the CyberWatch website. And if you'd like further information, please do send a request to that info@nationalcyberwatch.org.
And Lauren, also the order within a learning objective, that the learning objectives that have dozens of concepts, not all the concepts have to be completed for the module to be complete and available. So there are certain ones that are required, but not, for instance, all 80 of the concepts have to be done in that one learning objective.
Yeah, it's a great point, Alan, because the other aspect of CBML is it is very modular, and therefore each of these modules are designed so that they could be used as supplemental material to an existing traditional course, or they could be sequenced in an online environment using the empirically designed pathways to allow someone to be self-paced in working through these materials. So it's going to be deployed in differing ways in different organizations. Educational institutions may, really use these as resources to augment or supplement or enhance their existing programs. Corporations may use them as a turnkey solution to train employees. And a lot of that is still, kind of a work in progress.
Any other questions?
So let me post one more before we close. So since CBML is a continuous learning process, Alan, what do you see as the plans for in enhancing, kind of going to Lauren's thought here, enhancing or extending the progress we made so far, and how might those participating today contribute to those plans?
Well, that sort of follows along with the follow-up question that Lauren just posted too.
Yeah, is that perfect? Wow, you read my mind, Lauren. No, don't be sorry. That's awesome. Right. So do you have a plan to get the word out? There we go. To SMEs, educators, to become contributors to curriculum going beyond the NCC membership.
And so the panel, both the original core curriculum mapping panel and the most recent ISF standards panel, both of those included and actually were advertised outside of the NCC membership. So I would actually say maybe the majority of the panel members were not from member organizations. We'd have to go back and do some statistics and make sure I'm correct on that. But I think for the large part, we went to, for subject matter experts, we tapped into ISC squared, we tapped into ISACA, ISSA, and several of the other industry professional organizations. And then separate from that, we tapped into the academic world of who has cyber curriculum and programs in different post secondary education. So I think that still, with NCC's marketing and announcements that they do, this whole process over the last 2 years has been an attempt to get the word out beyond the membership, and I think that we will continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple sources for that. One, there is the National CyberWatch Communicator, which is a email newsletter that goes out to thousands of folks today, and of course it's really available. That is, again, not only addressing members, but also really any organization that's interested in cybersecurity. So that is announcements about a lot of programs that are going around the country. One of the roles of CyberWatch is to be a communicator of information about cybersecurity, and that's a role we play for, again, for NSF as their national center, as well as for other federal agencies. And then in addition to that, we always post these calls on LinkedIn and other social media sites. So again, we try to distribute it as broadly and as in the most effective ways as possible. But Lauren, or if you or anyone else on the call has ideas on other sources, other channels we should be using, we're always open to that. We want to make sure that everybody that would like to participate can participate. So again, thank you for that question. Do you have a social media blurb that you could give to panel members so we can tweet, post out on our own circles? That's a fantastic idea, Lauren, and yes, we do. I will mention your comment to Lynn Dome, who runs our social media efforts, and have her get back to you if you'd like with specifics on that. Terrific. Okay, well, again, I'd like to thank you for attending today's virtual brown bag lunch. Sorry for the brief delay in getting started with the mix-up. I'm still not sure how that happened with the Zoom link. I would like to thank Alan for sharing his experience and leading the standards panel, developing the Information Security Fundamentals Competency-Based Mastery Learning course. The CBML libraries are currently being developed by the CSP, as we mentioned. And so the future brown bag lunch presentations that you see here will be now focused on specific CBML curriculum libraries that you could implement in your environment to raise the capability and maturity of students or employees. So if you have further interest, again, about the work that we're doing, please do send a note to info@nationalcyberwatch.org or visit our webpage at www.nationalcyberwatch.org/CSP for a curriculum standards panel. Thank you again for attending today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Good afternoon.
Thank you all.